My name is Natalie Brooks, and I was 18 the night my mother told me I'd be back on my knees in a month. I still remember the way her lips curled when she said it, like my entire life was a bad decision she'd already watched 100 times. My dad didn't say much. He just grabbed the doorknob, jaw clenched so tight I thought his teeth would crack, and slammed the front door behind me so hard the porch light flickered. That sound used to echo in my nightmares. Back then, I stood on the porch with a secondhand duffel bag, a prepaid phone, and a stupid amount of anger. I told myself I'd rather sleep in a bus station than crawl back into a house where my dreams were treated like a disease. They thought I'd fail, that I'd run out of money, out of options, out of pride. They thought fear would drag me home. Instead, it lit a fuse. 10 years later, at 28, that same fuse had burned all the way to a life they never imagined I'd build. A different city, my own company, people who actually believed in what I could do with a keyboard and a problem. I hadn't heard my mother's voice in years. I'd trained myself not to miss it. So when I rolled over one Monday morning, groggy from another late-night deployment, and saw my phone screen lit up with 36 missed calls from Mom, I just stared. My notifications were a wall of desperate messages. Please pick up. We need you. It's all gone. They said you're the only one who can fix this. For a full minute, I just lay there, heartbeat pounding in my ears, thumb hovering over the voicemail icon. 10 years earlier, they'd kicked me out for chasing a future they didn't respect. Now, apparently, that same future was the only thing standing between them and disaster. Was this karma, revenge, or something uglier I wasn't ready to name? Before I tell you what I heard in those voicemails, and what I did when I finally called back, tell me in the comments what time it is, where you are, and where you're watching from. I want to see just how far this story of family, pride, and payback will travel. If this chapter of my life had a commit message, it would be origin story, kicked out, fired up. To understand why those 36 missed calls felt like a punchline from the universe, you have to go back to the last night I slept under my parents' roof. I grew up in a blue-collar Midwestern town that smelled like rain on hot asphalt and machine oil. Around there, success meant you kept your head down, worked hard, and didn't ask for more than a steady paycheck and a decent truck. My parents ran a small auto parts shop that my dad liked to call the backbone of the neighborhood. From the time I could reach the counter, everyone assumed I'd end up behind that register or in some back office doing invoices. The problem was, I was in love with something they couldn't see or touch: code. While other kids were hanging out at the mall, I was staying up too late on an ancient hand-me-down laptop, teaching myself how to break into my own Wi-Fi router and then fix it again. It wasn't about doing anything illegal, it was about understanding how things worked, and how they broke. The first time I found a security flaw in a school website and quietly emailed the administrator how to fix it, I felt more alive than any shift at the shop ever made me feel. My parents didn't see talent, they saw a distraction. "You're wasting time on that computer," my dad would mutter, wiping grease off his hands at dinner. "Real work is done with your hands, not hiding behind a screen." My mom would add her usual chorus: "You're smart enough to be a nurse or an accountant. People like us don't gamble on pipe dreams." Every conversation about my future felt less like guidance and more like a closing door. Senior year, while everyone was talking about prom, I was secretly applying to a competitive coding boot camp in a city 3 hours away. It wasn't college in the traditional sense, but it was my shot. An intensive program that promised to turn raw obsession into a job in tech. When I got the acceptance email, complete with a partial scholarship, I sat on the edge of my bed and cried silent, shaky tears of relief. For the first time, I had proof that someone outside my house believed in me. I chose the worst possible moment to tell them: family dinner. The TV was off, which almost never happened, and my dad had just started talking about how a guy he knew could get me an interview at a local bank. Stable work, good benefits, he said, pointing his fork at me like a gavel. I set my phone down on the table, acceptance email open, and said, I already have something. I've been accepted into a software engineering boot camp in the city. I start in August. Silence. My dad stared at me like I'd just admitted to robbing the bank instead of working at it. My mom's eyes narrowed, scanning the email like she was searching for a scam. You applied behind our backs? She asked, voice low and dangerous. If I'd told you, you would have shut it down, I said, trying to keep my hands from shaking. They gave me a scholarship. I can work part-time. This is my shot to do something I'm actually good at. My dad's chair scraped back. You think you're better than us now? Too good for honest work? That's not what I said, I shot back. I just don't want to spend my life stocking shelves and pretending I never wanted anything else. My mom leaned forward. And who do you think is going to pay for this little fantasy? You think money grows on trees in that laptop of yours? I swallowed. I've been saving. I can get loans. I'm not asking you to pay for it. I'm asking you to just not stand in my way. They looked at each other, and in that split second, I saw it. Not worry. Not confusion. Pride. The kind that would rather break a child than bend. If you walk out that door for some internet scam, my dad said, voice flat, don't expect to walk back in like nothing happened. I'd rather leave than stay and hate myself, I whispered, surprised to hear the words out loud. My mom stood up slowly, wiping her hands on a dish towel as if I were just another mess to clean. You want to play adult? Fine. You're 18. Pack your things. Her eyes were cold, almost bored, when she added, you'll be back begging in a month. I'd like to say I hesitated. I didn't. I went upstairs, grabbed the duffel bag I'd secretly packed over the past week, a few changes of clothes, my laptop, a printed copy of my scholarship email, and walked back down without looking at the family photos on the wall. At the door, I turned once more, hoping for some crack in their resolve. My mom folded her arms. My dad reached past me, opened the door, and when I stepped onto the porch, he slammed it shut hard enough to rattle the windows. The lock clicked. So did something in my chest. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, the rideshare I'd ordered. I walked down the driveway without looking back. But inside my head, one question looped like bad code. If your own parents don't believe in you, how do you convince yourself you're worth fighting for? If this chapter of my life had a commit message, it would be Version 1.0, Hard Fork from Family Branch. The city I moved to wasn't glamorous. It was loud, a little grimy, and the cheap studio I found with the help of a friend barely qualified as an apartment. The walls were thin, the pipes screamed at odd hours, and the mattress I bought from a thrift store had exactly 2 settings, lumpy and lumpier. But it was mine. No one stood in the doorway telling me who I had to be to earn the right to sleep there. I got my first job a week before boot camp started. Overnight cashier at a 24-hour grocery store. The fluorescent lights made everyone look tired, but they were the only lights that kept me awake as I memorized JavaScript syntax between customers buying energy drinks and microwave burritos. My schedule was brutal. Work from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., rush home, grab a 2-hour nap, then drag myself to class by 9. I ate instant noodles and pretended the rumbling in my stomach was just ambition. Boot camp was like trying to drink from a fire hose while juggling chainsaws. The instructors spoke fast, code even faster. First week, I felt like an imposter in a room full of geniuses. Second week, I realized most of us were equally terrified, just hiding it in different ways. There was a moment during a lab when I stared at a blinking cursor for so long it felt like it was mocking me. Inside, my mother's voice whispered, "This is a phase. You're going to fail. You'll come home. You always do." One afternoon, after a particularly humiliating code review, I stepped outside the building to breathe. I scrolled through my phone out of habit and saw a message from an unknown local number. "Hey Nat, it's the bank manager. Your parents gave me this number. They wanted to check if you were done with your little adventure yet. Call me if you're ready to talk about something more realistic." The rage that pulsed through me was white hot. They were checking up on me through other people, not to see if I was okay, but to see if I was ready to admit defeat. For a second, I almost called back just to scream. Instead, I blocked the number, stuck my phone in my pocket, and marched back into class. If I quit now, I wouldn't just prove them right. I'd never know who I could have become. Still, grit doesn't pay rent. Halfway through the program, I hit a wall. I was behind on assignments. My body felt like it was running on fumes. And an email from the grocery store manager warned that if I came in late one more time, I'd be replaced. That night, on my 15-minute break, I sat on a stack of milk crates in the alley behind the store, head in my hands. I opened my banking app and stared at the number. $137.42. Not enough to cover next month's rent, let alone tuition installments. For the first time since leaving home, the idea of calling my parents slipped into my mind like a thief. "If you just apologize," a familiar inner voice taunted, "you can go back. They'll probably still help you go to a real school. You don't have to prove anything. You're tired. Just go home." Then another thought cut through, sharp and cold. They didn't leave a door open. They slammed it. The next day at boot camp, our instructor announced a small local hackathon. 24 hours, small teams, real-world security problems from local nonprofits and businesses. Winners would get a small cash prize and introductions to employers. I almost didn't sign up. The idea of adding one more thing to my overfilled plate was laughable. But a classmate nudged me. "You're good at finding bugs," he said. "Isn't this your thing?" It was. I signed up. During that hackathon, something shifted. In a cramped co-working space that smelled like pizza and burnt coffee, I spent almost 12 straight hours tearing apart a flimsy login system for a small charity, then rebuilding it with proper protections. Every time I found a vulnerability, it felt like solving a piece of a puzzle no one else noticed. When the judges announced that our team won in the Best Security Fix category, the $500 prize felt like winning the lottery. It wasn't just about the money. It was proof that the weird, obsessive way my brain worked actually had value to someone other than me. Later that night, I stood at my tiny kitchen counter counting the bills and asked myself a question I'd been avoiding. Was I building a life to escape my parents, or to become someone I could respect even if they never did? If this chapter of my life had a commit message, it would be proof of concept. My skills compile in the real world. Graduation from boot camp didn't come with caps and gowns. It came with a PDF certificate, a portfolio of half-finished projects, and a stomach full of dread. Still, thanks to that hackathon and some late-night networking messages, I landed my first real tech job, junior security analyst at a tiny managed IT company on the edge of downtown. The office was cramped, the pay barely enough to keep me afloat. But the first time I saw security analyst Natalie Brooks on a company directory, I took a screenshot and stared at it until the screen timed out. The work was messy and unglamorous. Small businesses called us after clicking on sketchy links, ignoring updates, or giving their passwords to anyone who sounded confident on the phone. I cleaned up malware, reset passwords, and tried not to roll my eyes when someone told me their password was literally password. Every time I helped a panicked owner get their files back, I felt a little like a digital firefighter. One afternoon, our receptionist buzzed my desk. "Call for you," she said. "Guy says he's from your hometown, runs an auto parts shop. Sounds urgent." My heart stopped. There were plenty of auto parts shops in the world, but something in her tone made my skin prickle. I stared at the blinking line for a full 10 seconds before picking up. It wasn't my dad. It was a rival shop owner from the same town, frantic because his entire inventory system had been locked by ransomware. He'd gotten my number from a local business forum where my boss had recently posted about our services. "They say we have 48 hours before the price doubles," he said, voice shaking. "I heard you're the girl who ran off to hack computers. Can you help us?" I walked him through disconnecting the infected machines, collecting logs, and refusing to pay the ransom while we checked backups. As I worked, my mind kept wandering to my parents' shop a few blocks down from his. They were still out there, selling parts and stubbornness, acting like my existence was an embarrassing rumor. Did they know their competitor was calling me for help? Did they still tell people I'd wasted my life on computers? We managed to restore most of the rival shop's data from a backup. When the owner realized he didn't have to pay the criminals, he nearly cried on the phone. After we hung up, he texted, "Don't tell your folks I called you. They still say this tech stuff is a joke, but whatever you're doing, don't stop." That text was the first time revenge stopped being a vague feeling and became something sharper. Not about hurting them physically or even financially. I didn't want their shop burned down. I wanted something different. For the world they respected to start turning to me for the very skills they'd thrown me out for. I wanted their certainty to crack every time someone said, "You know who you should call? That daughter of yours." Life, of course, didn't become a smooth upward climb. About 2 years into that job, our little company landed a contract we weren't ready for, a regional hospital network that needed a full security overhaul. We were understaffed, overconfident, and optimistic in the way only desperate small companies can be. I begged my boss to bring in outside experts. He said we couldn't afford it. When the hospital got hit with a minor breach 6 months later, nothing catastrophic, but enough to make the local news, guess who became the convenient scapegoat? The junior analyst whose name had been on a few of the audit reports. I walked into the office one Tuesday and walked out with a cardboard box of my belongings, a half-hearted apology, and a line about how this will be a learning experience for you. That night, sitting on the floor of my studio with that same battered laptop from boot camp, I felt closer to calling my parents than I had in years. Not because I wanted help, just because part of me wanted to throw my failure in their faces before they heard it from someone else. "See?" I imagine my mom saying, smug. "Real life caught up with you." Instead, I opened my email and found a message forwarded from an old boot camp instructor. "Nat, I saw what happened with the hospital. That wasn't on you. If you want to turn this into something, there's a security meetup next week. People there have built companies off moments like this." I went. In a basement full of pizza boxes and bad coffee, I listened to a speaker talk about a gap in the market. Small businesses and mid-sized institutions that needed security but couldn't afford a full-time team. As he spoke, images flashed in my mind. My parents' shop, that rival owner, the hospital, all trying to navigate threats they didn't understand. On the train ride home, an idea burrowed into my brain. What if I built a service that didn't just swoop in after disasters, but actually taught these businesses to protect themselves? What if the girl who got kicked out for loving computers became the person people turned to when their world was on fire? Of course, between an idea and a company is a canyon full of fear. I had some savings, a bruised reputation, and exactly zero experience running anything. But I also had something I hadn't had at 18, proof I could survive losing everything and rebuild. So I did the stupid, brave thing. I skipped the safe job offers for generic help desk roles and started sketching out what would become my own cybersecurity firm. I called it Locklight Security because sometimes you need a lock and sometimes you need a light to see the threat. As I wrote that name for the first time, one question kept me honest. Was I building this to help people like my parents, or to watch people like my parents kneel in front of the daughter they'd thrown out? The answer, if I'm being honest, was both. If this chapter of my life had a commit message, it would be major refactor, from employee to founder, fueled by failure and quiet anger. The first year of Locklight security was held together by caffeine, spreadsheets, and stubbornness. I worked out of a sublet corner of a co-working space that used to be a warehouse. My first clients were exactly the kind of people my parents respected. Small manufacturers, logistics companies, mom-and-pop shops with aging computers and passwords written on sticky notes under the keyboard. We offered something different, not just call us when everything explodes, but ongoing monitoring, realistic training, and plain English explanations. I became fluent in translating nerd into normal. No, Carl, I'd explain patiently to a grizzled warehouse manager. You can't use your dog's name plus 123 as a password for the payroll system. Imagine giving a stranger your keys and hoping they don't notice the label that says front door. Word spread slowly. A client would avoid a phishing disaster because someone remembered one of our training sessions, and suddenly their friend wanted in. I hired my first employee, then my second. I brought on a co-founder, Marcus, who handled sales and operations while I lived in the land of logs, alerts, and incident response plans. We weren't rich, but we were stable, and every time I signed a new contract, I felt a flicker of vindication. Meanwhile, my hometown turned into a ghost I occasionally glimpsed through social media. I didn't follow my parents, but the internet has a way of shoving your past into your present. I'd see photos from the annual town fair, the same Main Street parade route, the familiar green awning of my parents' shop in the background. Sometimes a mutual acquaintance would message me, "Saw your company in an article, your folks must be proud." I never had the heart to respond with the truth. Once, about 6 years after I left, I got an email from my mother. The subject line was just my name. The body was short. "We heard you started some computer business. Your father thinks you'd be better off doing something stable. There's still a place for you at the shop if you decide to come home and work like a normal person. Think about your future." I stared at that email until the words blurred. There was no mention of the night they'd kicked me out, no apology, no acknowledgement of the years in between. Just an offer to come back and squeeze myself into the version of me they'd always wanted. I archived the message without replying. If they wanted to see my future, they could Google my company like everyone else. Locklight hit a turning point around our 8th year. A regional business magazine did a feature on women leading the fight against cybercrime, and somehow my interview ended up on the cover. In the article, they mentioned my hometown, the fact that I'd been the first in my family to go into tech, and my focus on protecting small businesses that couldn't afford traditional security. They didn't mention that I'd been kicked out at 18. That part of the story was mine. I'd be lying if I said I didn't think about my parents reading that piece. Did my dad sit at the kitchen table with his coffee, flipping through the pages until he saw my photo? Did my mom trace the words CEO and founder with her finger and feel anything other than annoyance? Or did they toss the magazine aside like junk mail? The not knowing ate at me sometimes, but I refused to open that door. Then came the Monday morning with the 36 missed calls. The night before, Locklight had pulled an all-nighter handling a ransomware incident for a medium-sized logistics company in another state. We'd managed to stop the spread, restore backups, and help them avoid paying a 6-figure ransom. I stumbled into bed around 4 a.m., set my phone to Do Not Disturb, and passed out. When I woke up, sunlight was bleeding around the edges of my blackout curtains. My brain felt like it had been wrapped in cotton. I grabbed my phone out of habit, expecting a couple of Slack messages and maybe a status update from Marcus. Instead, the lock screen was a wall of calls from one contact, Mom, 36 missed calls, starting at 1:12 a.m. The last one had come in 20 minutes ago. There were voicemails. There were texts. My chest tightened as I opened the messages, scrolling past line after line of panic. Natalie, please, we're in trouble. They say everything is gone. Dad is freaking out. They said your company name on the news. Please answer. They say you're the only one who can fix this. My first terrible instinct was satisfaction. I'm not proud of it, but it's the truth. This was the exact scenario my darkest, pettiest fantasies had scripted. The parents who threw me out for chasing a fake career, now begging that same career to save them. It felt like the universe had finally delivered my revenge on a silver platter. Then I tapped the voicemail icon. My mother's voice spilled out, but it wasn't the sharp, clipped tone I was used to. It was jagged and raw. Nat, it's me. Please. I know you probably don't want to hear from us, but the shop's computers, everything's locked. They're saying customers' data is at risk, that we might have to pay money we don't have, that we could lose everything. There was some expert on TV saying small businesses need modern security, and someone in town said, "You do that now, that you're successful." They showed your picture, Nat. I didn't know you. Her voice broke. We told everyone you were just going through a phase. We were wrong. I was wrong. Please, I'm begging you. Your father won't admit it, but he's terrified. They say we have 48 hours. Please call me back. Please. The second voicemail was my dad. He sounded older, smaller. Natalie, it's your father. I know I'm the last person you want to hear, and I deserve that. But we're in a mess here, and they say you can help. If you could just look at what's happening, tell us what to do. I don't expect anything from you. I don't know who else to call. I sat on the edge of my bed, phone heavy in my hand, heart racing. For 10 years, I'd built a life on the assumption that I'd never hear those words from him. I don't know who else to call. Part of me wanted to let them sweat, to wait until the 47th hour and show up like a heroine in a movie, letting them choke on their pride. Another part of me pictured their employees, people who had nothing to do with my family drama, watching their paychecks vanish because my parents refused to understand modern risks. So there I was, 36 missed calls, a lifetime of hurt, and a chance to decide what revenge really meant. Was revenge making them lose everything, or making them live long enough with their mistakes to truly understand them? If this chapter of my life had a commit message, it would be, critical alert, past dependency calling current self for emergency support. I didn't call them back right away. I called my COO. We've got a new potential incident, I said, forcing my voice to stay neutral. Small auto parts shop in my hometown. Ransomware? Sounds like customer data exposure. High emotional risk? Very personal. Marcus didn't ask for details. Send me what you've got. We'll treat them like any other client until you say otherwise. That was the thing about building my own company. I'd surrounded myself with people who respected boundaries without needing the whole story. I finally dialed my mother's number an hour later. She picked up on the first ring, breathless. Natalie? Yeah, I said, my voice coming out calmer than I felt. I heard your messages. She launched into a frantic explanation. Weird pop-up. Someone in the shop clicked a link. All their inventory and customer files suddenly encrypted. A ticking countdown on the screen demanding Bitcoin they didn't have. The bank had mentioned regulators, fines, the possibility of losing their merchant account. A local news crew had already parked outside to do a story on cybercrime hitting Main Street. In the middle of the chaos, someone had remembered that the girl they'd pushed out of their lives now ran a security company that helped places just like this. I'll need access to the systems, I said, switching into my work voice. And I'm not doing this over the phone. I'll be there this afternoon. Silence. Then, in a small voice, You're coming here? If you want my help, Yes, I answered, but we're doing this my way. This is work, Mom. I'm not coming home as your kid. I'm coming as the incident response lead from Locklight Security. I could hear her swallow. Okay. Driving back into my hometown after 10 years felt like stepping into a preserved snapshot where everyone else had aged, but the buildings hadn't. The main street still had the same cracked sidewalks, the same diner, the same faded billboards. But when I pulled up in front of my parents' shop, something was different. A local news van parked at the curb, camera pointed toward the front door, capturing footage of a local staple under cyber siege. I stepped out of my car in a blazer with my company's logo stitched on the pocket, laptop bag over my shoulder, visitor badge from some earlier client still clipped to my belt. For a second, I just stood there, staring at the green awning I'd once wiped down after school. The sign above the door read, Brooks Auto Parts and Service. For the first time, the name felt more like my last name than my identity. Inside, chaos. Phones rang unanswered. 2 employees argued quietly near the counter. The front computer displayed the classic ransom note. Red countdown. Ominous warning about files being locked forever if payment wasn't made. My mother stood behind the counter, pale and wild-eyed. My father was in the back office yelling into a phone about crooks and ridiculous demands. When my mother saw me, she froze. For a heartbeat, I saw the version of her from my childhood. The woman who'd packed my school lunches, cheered at my piano recitals, then the years crashed back in. The slammed door, the email calling my career a phase. Natalie, she whispered, you're here. I nodded once. Let's work. I moved through the shop like any other client site. I asked about their backups. Spotty. Their password practices. Awful. Their network setup. Non-existent segmentation. Shared logins. An old server humming in a dusty corner like a forgotten time bomb. I could feel my father watching me from the office doorway, arms crossed, face a hardened mask that didn't quite hide the fear in his eyes. At one point, he barked, "So can you fix it or not?" I straightened up from where I was tracing a cable. "Yes," I said. "We can likely recover most of your data without paying the ransom, but I'm not doing this as a favor. You'll sign an incident response contract like every other client. You'll pay our emergency rate, and you'll follow my instructions even if you don't like them." His jaw clenched. "You're really going to charge your own family?" I took a slow breath. 10 years ago, you made it very clear I wasn't part of this family unless I followed your script. I built this company without a cent from you. What you're asking for now is my expertise, not my childhood. That has a price. For a moment, I thought he'd explode. Instead, his shoulders sagged. "Fine," he muttered, "whatever it takes." We set up in the small back office where I'd once done homework on top of parts catalogs. I connected my laptop, started pulling logs, and coordinated with my team over a secure channel. As we worked, my parents hovered awkwardly, asking questions that veered between practical and painfully personal. "Is this what you do all the time?" my mother asked quietly at one point, watching lines of text scroll by on my screen. "Help people like us?" "Yes," I said without looking up. "People like you. People who never thought this could happen to them. People who didn't think they needed someone like me until it was almost too late." The words hung between us heavier than the hum of the overworked server. It took hours, but eventually we found a clean backup from a few days before the attack. Not perfect. They'd still lose some recent orders, some emails, but enough to restore operations. We cleaned the infected machines, hardened their systems, and set up proper off-site backups. I installed basic monitoring tools, locking down the digital doors they hadn't known were wide open. When I finally leaned back in the squeaky office chair, exhausted, my father spoke. "So, we're going to be okay?" "Digitally, yes," I said. "Legally, you'll need to notify your customers and probably talk to a lawyer about data exposure. Financially, you'll be bruised, not broken. If you follow the security plan we're putting in place, you'll be better protected going forward. My mother blinked back tears. Natalie, thank you. I didn't say, you're welcome. Not yet. Instead, I asked the question that had been burning a hole in my chest all day. Do you understand now why I left? Why I fought so hard to do this work? My father stared at the floor. I understood the second I saw your face on that news segment about local security expert warns small businesses. I just didn't want to admit it. He looked up, eyes shining with something dangerously close to remorse. We were wrong. About the computers, about calling it a phase, about everything that night. My mother nodded quickly, words tumbling out. We were scared. We didn't understand your world, so we tried to drag you back into ours. We thought we were protecting you by pushing you toward what we knew. Instead, we pushed you away completely. She swallowed. I told people you'd come crawling back. You didn't. You flew. Part of me felt a fierce, satisfying vindication hearing those words. Another part felt unexpectedly sad, like seeing the ruins of a building you'd once called home. I'm not that 18-year-old anymore, I said softly. I'm not coming back to run the register. I won't pretend this never happened. If you want a relationship with me now, it has to be built on who I am, not who you wanted me to be. My father nodded slowly. What does that look like? For starters, I replied, you're going to attend one of my security workshops next month. Sit in the front row. Listen to every word about how pride and ignorance destroy small businesses. And after that, you're going to be honest with your employees, with your friends, with yourselves, about how you treated me and how wrong you were. He winced. You want us to tell people? I want you to stop pretending this is just a funny story about your rebellious daughter who finally did something useful, I said. You kicked me out for chasing the very skills that saved you today. That's not just ironic. It's dangerous. Maybe if people hear it from you, they'll think twice before doing the same to their own kids. It wasn't the movie version of revenge. There was no dramatic groveling on the floor, no triumphant walk-off into the sunset while everything behind me burned. Instead, there was paperwork, hard conversations, and the quiet, undeniable shift of power from the people who once controlled my life to the woman sitting at their desk, calmly telling them how to keep theirs. If this chapter of my life had a commit message, it would be privilege escalation, from discarded daughter to lead architect of consequences. The workshop I made them attend was one I'd given a dozen times before, but that night it felt different. The community center's multi-purpose room was filled with small business owners clutching notebooks and coffee cups, faces lined with the exhausted hope of people trying to keep their dreams afloat. On the folding chairs in the front row sat my parents, side by side, looking smaller than I'd ever seen them. I started the way I always did, with a story. 10 years ago, I said, a teenager in a blue-collar town fell in love with computers. Her parents thought it was a distraction, a phase, something that would never pay the bills. When she chose that path over the one they'd laid out for her, they kicked her out. No safety net, no soft landing, just a slammed door and a prediction that she'd come crawling back. I saw my mother flinch. My father stared straight ahead, jaw tight. Fast forward a decade, I continued. That same family business was hit with ransomware, their entire system locked. Customer data at risk, bank accounts on the line, and the only person with the skills to pull them back from the brink? I let the silence stretch for a beat. The daughter they'd pushed away. You could feel the room shift as people connected the dots. Some looked at my parents. Others looked at their phones, probably mentally scrolling through their own kids' ambitions and arguments. My parents didn't bolt for the door. They stayed. They listened. They took notes like everyone else. After the workshop, a few owners came up to thank me, to ask questions, to schedule follow-up calls. One older woman lingered, her eyes glossy. My son wants to be a game designer, she said. I've been telling him to get a real degree first. Maybe, maybe I shouldn't say it like that anymore. Maybe ask him what his plan is instead of assuming he doesn't have one, I suggested. You can worry and still listen. When the room finally cleared, my parents approached. My mom spoke first. You told that story very gently, she said, kinder than we deserved. I didn't change the facts, I replied. I just didn't use your names. My dad cleared his throat. I'll use them, he said gruffly. At the diner, at church, wherever. People need to know we screwed up. Maybe it'll keep someone else from doing what we did. We ended up at that same diner afterward, the three of us in a booth that suddenly felt too small for everything between us. The waitress, someone I vaguely remembered from school, did a double take when she saw me. Haven't seen you around in years, she said. Your folks were bragging the other day that their daughter was on the news for some computer thing. Guess that was you, huh? Yeah, I said simply. That was me. After she left, my mother sighed. We did brag, she admitted. It was selfish. We wanted the proud parent story without earning the right to tell it. She looked at me, really looked at me, in a way she hadn't since before high school. I'm sorry, Natalie, for kicking you out, for choosing our fear over your future, for all the years we missed because we were too stubborn to say we were wrong. My father nodded, his hands wrapped around his coffee mug like it was the only solid thing left. I thought being a good parent meant pushing you toward what I understood. I didn't see that I was pushing you away from yourself. That's on me. I can't fix those 10 years. I don't expect you to just forgive and forget because we finally needed you. I let their words settle. I'd imagined this moment so many times, usually with a soundtrack and a single tear rolling down someone's cheek. Reality was messier. Their apologies didn't erase the night I'd stood on the porch with a duffel bag and nowhere to go. They didn't give back the birthdays spent alone, the holidays I'd worked through because being on call for strangers felt less painful than being unwanted by my own family. I do forgive you, I said eventually, and their heads snapped up. Not because what you did was okay. It wasn't. But because I'm tired of carrying the weight of your choices on my back. Forgiving you is for me, not just for you. My mother's eyes welled. Does that mean we can start over? I shook my head gently. We can start again, I corrected. But we're not going back. I'm not moving home. I'm not giving up my company to help out at the shop. I will visit sometimes. You can visit me. We can call. We can learn who we all are now, as adults. But the conditions are different this time. What conditions? My dad asked, wary. Respect, I said. You don't get to belittle my work, my choices, or the people I love. You don't get to make jokes about me being the computer nerd who finally paid off. You don't get to rewrite history to make yourselves the heroes. If someone asks what happened, you tell the truth. You were scared. You were wrong. And your daughter built a life anyway. They both nodded almost in unison. And one more thing, I added. That college fund you saved when I was little? The one you used to wave in my face as leverage? My mother flushed. We never used it. We couldn't bring ourselves to. It's still there. Good, I said. I want you to turn it into a scholarship for kids from this town who want to study tech, design, whatever their parents don't understand. Call it whatever you want, but make sure the application asks one question. What would you do if your family didn't believe in your dream? Then help them do it anyway. They didn't argue. Maybe they were too tired. Maybe they finally understood. Driving back to the city that night, my phone buzzed with a new notification. A batch of error logs from a different client. Another problem to solve. Another life I'd chosen. I glanced once in the rearview mirror, watching the glow of my hometown shrink into the distance. I realized with a strange mix of sadness and relief that I no longer felt the urge to turn back. People like to say, The best revenge is living well. I used to hate that phrase. It felt like a consolation prize for people too scared to admit they still wanted payback. But sitting there behind the wheel, I finally understood. My real revenge wasn't watching my parents grovel. It was walking into their crisis as a whole person, on my terms, with a life that didn't depend on their approval or their money. It was helping them because I chose to, not because I needed to. It was forcing them to face themselves without letting their mistakes define me anymore. If you've ever been told your dream is stupid, unrealistic, or not for people like us, hear this. Your worth isn't measured by how quickly you fold yourself into someone else's fear. The people who truly love you will ask, "How can I help?" Not, "How can I stop you?" And if they don't, you are allowed to walk away, build something beautiful, and let them feel the loss of the version of you they refuse to see. As for my parents, we're a work in progress. We text, we call. Sometimes we argue, sometimes we laugh. They still don't understand half the jargon I use, but they don't mock it anymore. They ask questions. They show up. That's enough for now. So, if your mom kicked you out, your dad dismissed your dreams, or someone told you you'd be back begging in a month, I hope my story gives you one thing: permission. Permission to try. Permission to fail and try again. Permission to succeed so loudly that one day, if their world falls apart, they hear your name as the person who knows how to rebuild. If this final chapter of this story had a commit message, it would be Release 1.0, revenge achieved through self-respect, boundaries, and better futures for everyone watching.
Thank you for listening. Our team at Revenge ZN is dedicated to crafting meaningful, engaging storylines that resonate with real emotions and life lessons. We promise that all stories are purely fictional, created only to share valuable education and positive, helpful messages with our viewers. This script highlights the importance of self-respect, resilience, and the power of education in changing one's life path. Through the conflicts and reconciliation within the family, viewers can reflect on healthy boundaries, empathy, and understanding between parents and children. It encourages the audience to learn from mistakes, seek useful knowledge, and build a more positive, compassionate future.